undercover black CEO walks into his own store, shocked when an employee refuses to help him. It was just another regular morning when Marcus Reynolds, the CEO of a fast-growing retail chain, decided to take a bold step. He had built his company from the ground up, and now it had become one of the most recognized names in the industry. From a small startup to a multi-million-dollar empire, he had witnessed his business flourish over the years. But with success came distance, and Marcus couldn't help but feel that he was losing touch with the everyday struggles of his employees, the ones who worked tirelessly day in and day out to keep the business running smoothly. For years, Marcus had been caught up in board meetings, investor calls, and strategic plans. He rarely found the time to visit his stores, and when he did, it was always under the watchful eyes of managers, where employees knew they had to act on their best behavior. But Marcus wasn't interested in what his managers wanted him to see. He needed to experience the real pulse of the company, its heart, and he knew that could only happen if he stepped into his stores without anyone recognizing him. One night, while reviewing some reports in his office, an idea sparked in his mind. What if he went undercover? What if he could disguise himself as an ordinary customer and experience the store from a completely different perspective? It was risky, sure, but it was the only way he could truly understand the challenges his employees faced. The more he thought about it, the more it made sense. If he could put himself in their shoes, perhaps he could bring about real change within the company. Not just from the top down, but from the bottom up. The next morning, Marcus called his assistant and instructed them to clear his schedule for the day. No meetings, no calls, just a few hours in one of his stores. Then he set to work on the most important task of all, the disguise. He knew that if he was going to pull this off, he had to look the part. Gone were the crisp suits and polished shoes that were synonymous with his power and success. He opted for a simple black hoodie, jeans, and a baseball cap, a far cry from the well-dressed CEO who was usually the center of attention at corporate events. He took a deep breath, a little nervous but determined. This wasn't just a game to him. He wanted to understand what was really happening in his stores. He wanted to hear the truth without any filters. Marcus couldn't help but feel a slight rush of adrenaline as he pulled the hoodie over his head and caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. For the first time in years, he felt like a regular person again, disconnected from the corporate world he had been living in for so long. With everything in place, Marcus left his office and headed to the store he had chosen for his undercover mission. It wasn't the largest location, but it was one of the busiest. He had heard rumors about long lines, disgruntled employees, and complaints from customers, and he wanted to see if those stories were true. As he arrived at the store, he took a moment to gather his thoughts. His heart raced a little. This was it. No turning back now. Stepping inside, Marcus was immediately hit with the noise of the busy store. It was a typical Saturday afternoon, and the place was packed. Customers were browsing the aisles, employees were restocking shelves, and the hum of the cash registers filled the air. But something was different. For the first time, Marcus wasn't the boss in charge. He was just another face in the crowd. No one knew who he was, and that made everything feel new and raw. He walked slowly through the aisles, taking in the sights and sounds around him. The store was clean, well-organized, and everything seemed to be running smoothly on the surface. But as he observed more closely, he noticed the small things. The tired eyes of the employees, the hurried pace of the workers restocking shelves, the lack of smiles as they interacted with customers. There was a sense of urgency in the air, a feeling that everyone was just going through the motions, doing their jobs but not necessarily enjoying them. Marcus felt a pang of guilt. Was this what his company had become? A place where employees worked just to get through the day? He had always prided himself on building a business that valued its people. But now, as he stood there in the middle of it all, he began to wonder if that was truly the case. He approached the first employee he saw, a young woman behind the counter who was busy organizing coupons. With a casual tone, he asked, "Hey, can you tell me where I can find the headphones?" The employee barely glanced up, her face expressionless as she responded, "Aisle 7, middle shelf." Her tone was flat, almost robotic, and Marcus couldn't help but notice how little enthusiasm she had in her voice. There was no excitement in her response, no eagerness to help. She seemed disengaged, like she was just going through the motions. As he walked to aisle 7, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. This wasn't how he imagined it. Was this the company he had worked so hard to build? He knew that a lack of enthusiasm among employees could lead to bad customer experiences, but this felt deeper. It was as if the spark had gone out, not just for the customers, but for the employees as well. He continued to walk through the store, making small talk with various employees, but the interactions were all the same. Employees were polite, but they seemed distant. It was almost as if they were doing their jobs out of obligation, not out of a sense of pride or passion for what they did. This was a far cry from the atmosphere he had envisioned when he first founded the company. Marcus couldn't help but think of the meetings he had attended in the past, where everyone spoke about company culture, about how important it was to treat employees with respect and make them feel valued. But as he stood in that store, he realized that the culture he had worked so hard to create wasn't reaching the front lines. It wasn't reaching the employees who were the backbone of the company. The experience was starting to weigh heavily on him. Marcus had hoped that his undercover visit would be an eye-opening adventure, a way to understand his company better, but what he had discovered so far was unsettling. He had no answers yet, only more questions. What was really going on with his employees? Why were they so disengaged? Were they overworked, underappreciated, or was it something else entirely? As he continued his walk through the store, he knew he couldn't ignore these feelings. His mission was just beginning. The day had only just started, but Marcus was already feeling the weight of his discoveries. There was more to this than he could have ever imagined, and he wasn't sure how deep the problems ran. But one thing was certain. His journey into the heart of his company had only just begun. Marcus walked deeper into the store, his senses heightened. With each step, he tried to understand what was truly happening in his company, far from the polished boardrooms and high-stakes meetings he was used to. The store was bustling with activity, yet there was an underlying sense of disconnect that Marcus couldn't ignore. It wasn't just the employees who seemed distant. The entire atmosphere felt impersonal. He stopped by an aisle filled with electronics and took a look at the latest gadgets. As he casually examined a set of headphones, he overheard two employees nearby chatting with each other. Their conversation had nothing to do with their work. Instead, they were discussing what they would do that evening. The conversation was light, but it also seemed detached from the task at hand. There was no enthusiasm in their voices about helping customers or about the products they were selling. It was as though they were going through the motions, but their minds were somewhere else. Marcus couldn't help but wonder, was this normal? Were his employees so used to this routine that they no longer found excitement in their jobs? After all, he had designed the company with values of family, teamwork, and passion. He believed that his employees were the heart of the business, and that treating them well would make them go above and beyond. But the reality he was seeing painted a different picture. He had thought that the company's culture would shine through even in the most mundane tasks. But here, the employees seemed tired, disinterested, and disconnected. He walked toward the back of the store where a group of employees were sorting through returns. As he passed by, he overheard a conversation that struck him. One employee was talking about how they had been working overtime without additional compensation, and another complained about the lack of communication between the store manager and the staff. It wasn't the first time Marcus had heard about the issue of long hours, but hearing it firsthand made it feel more real. What bothered him even more was the way they spoke. It wasn't just frustration that he heard in their voices, it was resignation. They had accepted that this was the way things were. The idea of change seemed foreign to them, as if it was something out of reach. Marcus's heart sank as he realized that for many of his employees, working at the store had become just a way to pay the bills, not something they felt passionate about. They weren't just disinterested in their work, they had stopped believing that their work could make a difference. Marcus paused in the middle of the store, taking a moment to absorb everything he had observed. The atmosphere was much heavier than he expected. He glanced around, noticing how employees avoided making eye contact with customers, and how their body language reflected a lack of energy. The employees were all wearing company uniforms, but the uniforms seemed to mask more than just their identity. They also masked their enthusiasm and pride. He walked past the customer service counter and noticed a young employee, a man in his early 20s, assisting an elderly customer with a complaint. The employee was polite but distant, hardly making an effort to connect with the customer beyond the bare minimum. As the elderly customer left the counter, he muttered a quick thank you. But the employee didn't respond, not even with a smile. It was as if they were just clocking in and clocking out without any sense of personal connection to their work. Marcus felt a pang of disappointment. This wasn't what he had envisioned when he started the company. He had always wanted his employees to feel valued, not just as workers, but as people. He had always preached about the importance of community, of building relationships with customers, and of creating an environment where everyone felt like they were part of something greater. Yet, what he was witnessing in his store was a far cry from that vision. He decided to speak to some employees, hoping to understand what was really going on. He approached a young woman who was arranging products on the shelves. She looked up, a bit startled at first before quickly regaining her composure. "Can I help you with anything?" she asked, her tone polite but not warm. Marcus smiled and asked her about her day, trying to keep the conversation light. He could sense that she was wary of talking too much and her answers were brief. As he probed a little deeper, asking her about the store's environment and the support she received from management, she hesitated. "It's fine," she said with a shrug. "It's a job. You know, we do what we can." Her response was so neutral, it almost felt like she had rehearsed it. Marcus could tell that she wasn't comfortable, but what struck him the most was how resigned she sounded. She wasn't hopeful, she wasn't passionate about her work, and she certainly didn't seem excited to be there. It was as if she had accepted the reality of her job and had no expectations for it to improve. Marcus walked on, his mind racing with thoughts and questions. Was this the culture he had built? Was this the company he had worked so hard to create? He remembered the early days when he would walk through the halls of his small office, interacting with his employees, learning about their lives, their goals, and their dreams. Back then, the company had felt like a family. Now it felt like a machine, a place where employees worked just to get by. The more he observed, the more questions he had. Were his employees unhappy because of the long hours and lack of appreciation? Or was there something deeper at play? Marcus knew that the key to fixing the problem was understanding the root cause, but he couldn't do that if he didn't first connect with the employees on a human level. It wasn't enough to just visit the store. He needed to dig deeper to understand their frustrations and their needs. Marcus continued his tour of the store, all the while keeping his thoughts to himself. He didn't want to influence anyone's behavior. He wanted to see the truth, raw and unfiltered. Every interaction he had only deepened his concern. The employees were polite, but they didn't seem to care. And that lack of care was beginning to seep into the way customers were treated. By the time he finished walking the aisles, Marcus realized that what he had hoped would be a simple observation had turned into a wake-up call. His company, once a symbol of innovation and employee satisfaction, had fallen into a rut. It wasn't just the managers or the leadership team who were responsible. The culture that had once been so strong had weakened over time, leaving behind a workforce that was simply going through the motions. As Marcus left the store that day, he knew that things needed to change. But how? He didn't have all the answers yet, but he was sure of one thing. He couldn't fix this problem from behind a desk. He needed to connect with his employees, listen to their stories, and learn from their experiences. Only then could he begin to rebuild the company he had once been so proud of. Marcus's day in the store was starting to feel longer than he had expected. As he continued to wander the aisles, he could feel the weight of the observations he had made so far pressing down on him. There was something troubling about the way the employees went about their work, and it seemed like no one noticed. The longer he stayed, the more disconnected everything felt, but nothing would prepare him for what happened next. It was an ordinary moment, nothing out of the ordinary, nothing that seemed significant at the time. Marcus had been walking through the clothing section of the store, just observing the customers browsing and employees folding clothes. He had a question about a particular shirt he had seen online, and since he was trying to remain in character as a regular customer, he decided to ask one of the employees nearby. As he approached a young woman folding shirts at a display, he hesitated for just a second. The woman appeared busy, but that wasn't unusual. Most employees were busy at this time of day. He casually asked, "Excuse me, can you tell me where I can find the size large in this shirt?" The young woman, who was wearing the store's uniform, didn't immediately look up from her task. Instead, she continued folding the shirts with a slow, deliberate motion. She didn't even glance up at Marcus to acknowledge his question. For a moment, he thought maybe she hadn't heard him, or that she was so engrossed in her work that she didn't notice him standing there. So he asked again, a little louder, "Excuse me, do you know where the large size is?" This time she slowly looked up, her expression neutral, almost blank. "It's in the back," she said, before turning her attention back to the stack of shirts she was working on, not bothering to offer any further help. For a moment, Marcus stood there in stunned silence. The interaction had been brief, impersonal, and strangely dismissive. He wasn't used to being treated this way. He had always been the one giving instructions, leading teams, being the center of attention. He wasn't used to being ignored, especially not in his own store. But more than that, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of disappointment. This wasn't just a simple customer service slip-up. It was a complete refusal to engage, a lack of respect that made him feel invisible. He stood there for a moment, unsure of how to proceed. Should he let it go? Should he brush it off? Or should he confront her, maybe reveal who he was and get some answers? But something inside of him told him not to do that, not yet. Instead, he took a deep breath, forced himself to smile, and walked toward the back of the store to find the shirt on his own. As he walked to the back, his mind raced with thoughts. He had always known that there were some issues within the company, but he never imagined it would be something as fundamental as this: an employee refusing to help a customer, even one who had simply asked for assistance. It wasn't just the refusal that troubled him. It was the way she had done it, almost like she didn't care. There had been no apology, no effort to make things right, just a detached response that felt more like a brush-off than anything else. When Marcus reached the back of the store and found the shirts, he still couldn't shake the feeling of disappointment. He could feel the weight of the interaction hanging over him. Was this how customers felt when they came into the store? Were they treated with indifference, just like he had been? He couldn't help but think that this kind of behavior would surely drive customers away, and that was the last thing he wanted for his company. He decided to approach the store manager, someone he had known for years and had always trusted. Marcus found him in the back office, speaking with a couple of employees. The manager smiled when he saw him, but quickly noticed that Marcus seemed off. "Hey, Marcus." "Everything good?" he asked, giving him a friendly pat on the back. Marcus forced a smile. "I'm fine, just had an interesting experience out there," he replied, trying to keep his voice casual. "Oh yeah, what happened?" the manager asked, clearly curious. Marcus took a deep breath. He wasn't sure how to say this without making it seem like a big deal, but he needed to know if the manager was aware of what had just happened. "I asked one of the employees for help with finding a shirt. She gave me a quick, impersonal answer and then just went back to folding clothes without offering any further help." The manager's face faltered for a moment, his smile fading as he processed what Marcus had said. "Really? That's not like her," he said, sounding surprised. "Maybe she was just having an off day." Marcus shook his head, not satisfied with the response. "I don't think so. It didn't feel like an off day. It felt like she just didn't care. It was like she couldn't be bothered." The manager seemed uncomfortable now. He looked away for a moment before meeting Marcus's gaze again. "I'll have a word with her. I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding. We're all busy here, but I don't want anyone feeling like they're being ignored." Marcus nodded, though he wasn't convinced. "I appreciate that, but this isn't just about one employee. It's about the culture. If this kind of thing is happening here, it's happening elsewhere too. Employees who don't feel motivated, who don't care about their work, it's a bigger problem than just bad customer service." The manager hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the conversation was going. "I understand, but we do what we can with the resources we have. I'm sure you know how demanding it can be to keep everything running smoothly." Marcus knew his manager was right. Running a store was hard work, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more at play here, something deeper that he had been blind to for so long. This wasn't just about the refusal of one employee to help him. It was about a larger issue, a culture of disengagement that was taking root in his company. As he walked out of the office, Marcus couldn't help but feel the weight of the day's experiences pressing on him. The refusal to help, the coldness he had witnessed, it all pointed to a problem that was much bigger than one bad day or one employee. The culture of the company, the one he had worked so hard to build, was starting to crumble. And Marcus knew that if he didn't do something about it soon, his entire company would pay the price. After the uncomfortable interaction in the store, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that the way he had been treated wasn't just an isolated incident. It was part of a larger pattern, one that he hadn't noticed before. The employees weren't just disengaged, they were disconnected from the very essence of the company. What troubled him the most was that he hadn't seen it sooner. How had he missed this? He had spent years building the company, nurturing it, and fostering a culture of respect and collaboration. But now, standing in the midst of his store, he began to see the cracks in the foundation. Marcus knew he needed to get to the bottom of this. If he wanted to understand what was really happening, he had to go beyond surface-level observations. He needed to hear from the employees directly, not just the managers who were always eager to present things in a positive light. It was time to do more than just observe. It was time to listen. The next day, Marcus decided to visit a different store location. This time, he didn't want to walk around aimlessly or blend in with the customers. Instead, he wanted to have direct conversations with the employees, to ask them about their experiences, their frustrations, and what they thought could make the store a better place to work. When he arrived at the new location, Marcus took a deep breath. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew that this was a crucial step. He walked into the store, greeted by a few familiar faces behind the counter. The store was quieter today, with fewer customers, which gave him a chance to speak more freely with the employees without distractions. His first conversation was with an older employee named Karen, who had been working at the store for years. Marcus approached her as she was restocking shelves. He casually asked her how she was doing, and she gave him a polite smile. But as they continued talking, he could sense that there was something more beneath the surface. Her answers were short and to the point, but Marcus could tell she wasn't fully engaged in the conversation. He gently probed, asking her about the work environment, the store culture, and whether she felt supported by the company. At first, Karen seemed hesitant to open up, but after a few minutes she began to speak more freely. "You know," she said, looking around as if to make sure no one was listening, "it's hard sometimes. I've been here for so long and I've seen a lot of changes. The company used to feel like a family, but it doesn't anymore. It's all about numbers now, how many customers we serve, how many items we sell. No one cares about us, just what we can do for the company." Marcus listened carefully, sensing the frustration in her voice. She wasn't just talking about her own experience. She was speaking for the entire staff. There was a disconnect between what the company stood for and how the employees felt in their day-to-day lives. The passion that had once been a driving force was now replaced by a sense of obligation, a feeling that they were working for a paycheck, not for a cause they believed in. Karen continued, her voice a little quieter now. "I'm not saying it's all bad. Some of the new managers are nice, but they don't seem to understand. They talk about teamwork, but they don't show it. It's all about meeting targets, hitting numbers, and when you fall short, you're the one who gets the blame." Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. This wasn't just about customer service anymore. This was about the very heart of the company, the employees, the people who made the business run smoothly, who interacted with customers every day. They felt undervalued, overworked, and disconnected from the company's mission. As Karen spoke, Marcus realized that the company's culture had shifted. What had once been a place where employees were encouraged to grow, collaborate, and feel part of something bigger, had become a place where results were everything. The focus on numbers and profits had overshadowed the importance of relationships, both between employees and the company, and between employees and customers. After speaking with Karen, Marcus made his way to the break room, where he found a group of employees taking a quick break. He sat down with them, hoping to get more insight into what they were experiencing. The group was a mix of new and seasoned employees, all with different roles within the store. At first, they were cautious, unsure of why Marcus was asking them about their work. But as he continued to ask questions, their walls began to come down. One of the newer employees, a young man named David, spoke up first. "It's just hard to stay motivated sometimes. The job itself isn't bad, but it feels like management only cares about one thing, getting the job done no matter what. If you have an idea or something you want to try, forget it. It's all about doing things the way they want it done." Another employee, Maria, chimed in. "I've been here for 3 years, and honestly, I've seen the place change. When I first started, it felt like we were all working together. Now, it's like we're just numbers on a spreadsheet. The team is scattered, and the leadership doesn't seem to understand what we need. Marcus absorbed their words, understanding that these weren't just complaints. They were the honest feelings of employees who felt left behind, who had been pushed to the margins as the company grew. The leadership team had become so focused on growth and expansion that they had lost sight of what had made the company special in the first place. As the conversation continued, Marcus realized that the problem wasn't just the lack of enthusiasm or the coldness of interactions. It was a deeper issue rooted in the company's culture. The employees no longer felt like they were part of a shared vision. They didn't feel valued or appreciated for the work they did, and as a result, they had stopped caring. They were showing up to do a job, but they weren't showing up with passion. Marcus knew he couldn't change everything overnight, but this was a wake-up call. He couldn't just focus on sales, profits, and expansion. He needed to rebuild the culture, to remind everyone why they were there in the first place. It wasn't just about meeting numbers. It was about creating a place where employees felt connected, respected, and valued. As he left the store that day, Marcus felt a new sense of determination. He had a clearer understanding of what was going wrong, but he also knew that the journey to fixing it wouldn't be easy. It would take time, effort, and most importantly, a change in mindset, from the top down. The following days felt heavier for Marcus as the weight of the conversations he'd had with his employees continued to linger in his mind. The frustrations they expressed, the exhaustion they had been carrying, it all pointed to a clear reality. Marcus couldn't ignore it anymore. The company he had spent years building, the company he was so proud of, was at a crossroads. Something had to change. But the question was, where to begin? After visiting several store locations and hearing the same concerns over and over, Marcus knew he needed to confront the issue head-on. He had to speak directly with the employees involved, to understand why things had gone so wrong, and to see if there was a way to restore the connection that once existed between the company and its workforce. He needed to take action, and that meant having tough conversations. He could no longer remain in the shadows, watching from a distance. It was time to reveal who he really was. Marcus walked into the store where the initial incident had occurred, the one where he had been brushed off by the employee when asking for assistance. He walked through the aisles, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. There would be no more hiding behind his disguise. He was ready to face the uncomfortable truth, even if it meant challenging his own perceptions of his company. He made his way to the section where the young woman had been folding shirts the day he was ignored. He could see her now, standing near the same display, organizing merchandise. This time he didn't hesitate. He walked right up to her, and this time she noticed him immediately. She looked up from her work, surprised to see him standing there again. For a moment they just stared at each other in silence. The young woman seemed nervous, unsure of what to say. Marcus smiled softly to put her at ease. "Hi there," he began. "I wanted to talk to you for a moment." She looked around, her eyes darting nervously, but she nodded. "Sure, how can I help you?" Marcus took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. He wasn't here to accuse or make her feel worse. He was here to understand. "I'm actually the CEO of the company," he said, watching her reaction closely. Her eyes widened and she looked visibly taken aback. For a moment she seemed frozen, not knowing how to respond. Marcus continued, "I've been coming into the store as a customer to see how things are going and to get a better sense of what our employees are experiencing. And I have to admit, I had an experience with you the other day. You didn't help me when I asked for assistance, and I just wanted to understand why." The young woman's face flushed red. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said quickly, her voice flustered. "I didn't recognize you and I was focused on my task. It wasn't intentional, I swear." "I didn't mean to be rude or anything." Marcus smiled gently, wanting her to feel comfortable. "I understand, but it wasn't just that you didn't recognize me. It was the way you responded. You seemed disengaged, like you didn't want to be there at all. And that's what I want to understand. Why is that? What's going on?" The young woman hesitated for a moment, glancing down at the shirts she had been folding. Finally, she spoke. "Honestly, I don't know. It's just been tough lately. The store's been really busy, and we've been short-staffed. It feels like we're always playing catch-up. Sometimes I feel like I'm not even really part of the team anymore. It's just work. Do your job, move on to the next thing, and don't expect anything in return." Her words struck Marcus deeply. This wasn't just about one interaction. It was about the deeper issues his employees were facing every day. They felt disconnected, unappreciated, and burnt out. They were working hard, but they weren't being recognized for their efforts. They weren't feeling supported or valued. Marcus's heart sank as he realized the extent of the problem. He had known there were issues, but hearing it so plainly from one of his employees made it undeniable. It wasn't just a lack of enthusiasm, it was a lack of belief in the company's mission. His employees weren't just struggling with the workload, they were struggling with the company culture itself. "I hear you," Marcus said, his voice sincere. "I really do. And I'm sorry you feel that way. This company was built on the idea of supporting our employees, making sure you feel valued, and creating an environment where you can grow. But clearly that's not happening, and that's on me. I've been so caught up in the bigger picture I didn't see the things that matter to you." The young woman looked surprised at his response. "But you're the CEO. You have so much on your plate, you probably didn't even know what was happening down here." "That's true," Marcus admitted. "I've been so focused on expanding the company, making decisions at the top level that I forgot the most important part, the people who make it all happen. I can't do this alone. I need to be there for you just as much as I expect you to be there for the company." There was a long pause as the young woman processed his words. Finally, she spoke again, this time with more vulnerability in her voice. "It's just hard, you know. We're always told to work harder, do more, hit the targets, but no one ever asks how we're doing. No one checks in with us. It's like we're just machines, not people." Marcus nodded slowly, his mind reeling from her honesty. This was what he needed to hear, the real, unfiltered truth. His company had become a place where employees were expected to perform without question, without support, and that needed to change. "Thank you for telling me that," Marcus said. "I can't promise that everything will be perfect overnight, but I promise you this. We're going to make things right. We're going to rebuild the culture here, and we're going to do it together. It's not just about hitting numbers anymore, it's about creating a place where you feel like you matter, where you feel appreciated." The young woman smiled, and for the first time that day, Marcus saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "That means a lot," she said softly. Marcus left the store that day with a sense of determination. He knew he had a long road ahead of him, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was on the right path. The changes wouldn't happen overnight, but he was committed to making sure that his employees, his team, felt heard, valued, and supported. As he walked to his car, Marcus couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just the CEO anymore. He was a leader who needed to listen, to understand, and to take action. It was time to change the company from the inside out, and it started with the people who made it all possible. The weeks that followed Marcus's confrontation with his employees were a blur of activity. The conversations he had sparked, the revelations he had discovered, it all weighed on him heavily. But as the dust settled, one thing became clear. Change was necessary, and it needed to happen quickly. He couldn't afford to let his company continue down this path. Not when the people who made it all possible felt disconnected, disrespected, and unnoticed. Marcus knew that if he wanted to rebuild his company's culture, he couldn't just throw out a few ideas and expect everything to improve. He had to take a deep, hard look at the way the company was being run and make fundamental changes. It wasn't just about implementing a few new policies. It was about a complete shift in mindset, one that would start from the very top and trickle down to every single employee. The first step in the transformation was to hold a company-wide meeting. Marcus called together the management team, the store managers, and representatives from every department. He needed to get everyone on the same page. When the meeting began, Marcus stood at the front of the room, feeling the weight of everyone's gaze. It was an odd feeling to be in the spotlight in this way, but he knew it was necessary. If he was going to ask his employees to trust him again, he had to be open, honest, and vulnerable. "I want to start by acknowledging something," Marcus began, his voice steady but sincere. "I've been the CEO of this company for years now, but I've failed to truly see the problems within it. I've been focused on growth, on numbers, on what the outside world thinks of us. But I've neglected the most important thing: you. The people who work here, who show up every day and give their best. You're the heart of this company, and I haven't treated you like that." There was a moment of silence in the room. The managers exchanged uncertain glances, unsure of how to respond. Marcus continued. I know that many of you feel overworked, underappreciated, and disconnected from the company's mission. I know that you've been asked to do more with less, and that your voices have been ignored. And for that, I'm truly sorry. The room was still, but Marcus could feel the weight of his words sinking in. This wasn't a speech, it was an apology, a promise that things would change. I've learned a lot in the last few weeks, and I've realized that the only way we can move forward is if we work together to rebuild the culture of this company. We need to restore trust, to show you that you matter, and to remind ourselves why we're here in the first place. It's not just about hitting targets. It's about creating a space where everyone feels valued, where teamwork is real, and where we all contribute to something bigger than ourselves. The room was quiet for a few moments as the employees processed his words. Then, slowly, one of the store managers stood up. I appreciate what you're saying, Marcus. We've all felt the strain. But change isn't easy. It'll take time. We can't just flip a switch and make everything better. Marcus nodded. You're right. Change will take time, but I'm committed to it. And I need you all to be committed to it, too. We're going to start by listening to the people who matter most, our employees. I want to hear from each of you. What do you need? What can we do to support you better? There was a murmur of surprise throughout the room. It was rare for the CEO to ask for input from the employees in such a direct way. But Marcus wasn't just looking for quick fixes. He was looking for real, actionable ideas that would address the root of the problem. Over the next several weeks, Marcus held individual meetings with employees from all levels of the company. He visited stores, spoke with team members, and asked them about their experiences. He didn't just ask about the good things, he asked about the challenges, the frustrations, and the things that made them feel unheard. And he listened. He took notes, he reflected, and he made it clear that their voices mattered. One of the common themes that emerged was the need for better communication. Employees wanted more transparency from management, and they wanted to feel like they were part of the decision-making process. Many of them felt disconnected from the company's leadership, as if they were just cogs in a machine. The more Marcus heard, the more he understood how critical it was to create a culture of openness and inclusivity. But it wasn't just about communication. It was also about recognition. The employees wanted to feel valued for their hard work, and they wanted to know that their efforts were making a difference. Marcus realized that he needed to find ways to show appreciation for his team, not just through bonuses or incentives, but through genuine recognition of their contributions. The next step was to address the workload. Many employees felt overwhelmed by the pressure to meet targets without adequate support. Marcus worked with the management team to develop more realistic expectations and ensure that employees had the resources they needed to succeed. He also introduced more flexible scheduling options to help reduce stress and give employees a better work-life balance. But perhaps the most important change was the company's renewed focus on its core values. Marcus made it clear that the company's mission was not just about making money, it was about making a difference. And that difference started with how they treated their people. From that point forward, every decision made by the company would be guided by the question, how will this impact our employees? As the weeks went by, Marcus began to see the changes he had hoped for. Employees started to engage more in team meetings, offering their ideas and suggestions. There was a noticeable shift in the store atmosphere. Employees were smiling more, interacting with customers with genuine enthusiasm and taking pride in their work. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The culture was beginning to shift, and Marcus knew that they were on the right track. But Marcus also knew that transformation was an ongoing process. There would be setbacks, challenges, and moments of doubt. But he was committed to the long journey ahead. He wasn't just the CEO anymore. He was a leader who had learned the importance of listening, connecting, and nurturing a culture of respect and collaboration. The change wasn't just about improving the company. It was about making it a place where everyone felt like they had a stake in its success. A place where every employee felt seen, heard, and valued. And Marcus knew that this was only the beginning. As he walked through the store one last time, watching the employees interact with customers and with each other, Marcus couldn't help but smile. This was what he had always wanted. A company where success wasn't just measured in profits, but in the strength of its people.